Okay, so we are live. All right, so we are live, right? Let me just check if everything is working fine and we'll be ready to go ahead after that. Yes, everything is working fine. Okay. So we are reading this book that is Men's Search for Meaning by Dr. Viktor E. Frankl, where, as the name suggests, the meaning of life is very important. It is so important that if you have the meaning of life, you can survive in the adverse condition. And if you don't have meaning of life, then in all the luxuries, you will feel something is not there. You will feel the void. So that is the crux of this book. And how can you find out the, what can I say, the meaning of life? And to explain that, the author talked about one thing, that is logotherapy, right? So abhi we are at the page number 132, and this book is about to end because total number of pages in this book is around 148. So out of 148, we have already covered like 131 pages so far, and we are at the page number 132. Almost like 16 pages are left, right? Including 16 or 17, like that's how it goes. So let's start without any further ado. एंड आज मेरे दिमाग में एक शायरी चल रही है, आई डोंट नो लाइक आप लोगों ने सुनी है नहीं सुनी है, बट फैज़ अहमद फैज़ की एक बहुत ही सुंदर शायरी है। एंड यूट्यूब पे आपको इवन जिया मोहिद्दीन भी उसको नरेट करते हुए दिख जाएंगे, और आपने शायद वो कुछ रील्स वगैरह में भी सुना हो। तो इट गोज़ लाइक कि मुझसे पहले सी मोहब्बत मेरे महबूब न मांग, मैंने समझा था कि तू है दरख्शाएं हयात, तेरा गम है तो गम दहर का झगड़ा क्या है, तेरी सूरत से है आलम इन बहारों को सबात, तेरी आंखों के सिवा इस दुनिया में रखा क्या है। एंड देर इज गो लाइक इट गोज ऑन एंड ऑन कि तू मिल जाए तो मेरी तकदीर निगूं हो जाए। एंड देन यू नो कि मैंने इतनी शिद्दत से तेरे को चाहता है, एंड इट गोज लाइक और भी दुख हैं ज़माने में मोहब्बत के सिवा, राहतें और भी हैं वसल की चाहत के सिवा। सो मेन पार्ट यही जो फेमस हुआ था उसका यही था। तेरी आंखों के सिवा दुनिया में रखा क्या है। इट रिमाइंड्स मी of something someone. Okay, let's just not get into it, and let's come back to this book. Researcher at the Yale University School of Medicine have been impressed by the number of prisoners of war of the Vietnam War who explicitly claimed that although their captivity was extraordinarily stressful, filled with torture, disease, malnutrition, and solitary confinement, they nevertheless benefited from the captivity experience, seeing it as a growth experience. तो इतनी एडवर्स कंडीशन में भी उन्होंने एज अ ग्रोथ देखा उसको, लाइक एक ग्रोथ एक्सपीरियंस की तरह देखा. सो इट्स ऑल अबाउट लाइक how you perceive things. I've said it earlier and I am going to say it again, and this is what author is also trying to say, right? Author भी वही चीज़ बोल रहे हैं कि अगर आपके पास मीनिंग ऑफ लाइफ है तो आप किसी भी एडवर्स कंडीशन को सर्वाइव कर पाओगे, जैसा उनके साथ कंसंट्रेशन कैंप में भी हुआ था. तो मीनिंग ऑफ लाइफ हर किसी के लिए अलग अलग हो सकता है. किसी के लिए हो सकता है कि अपने लव्ड वन के साथ अपनी ज़िंदगी बिताना, किसी के लिए हो सकता है कि जैसे एक साइंटिस्ट था उसके लिए एक प्रोजेक्ट था जो उसका इनकम्प्लीट था, उसको पूरा करना था. सो मीनिंग ऑफ लाइफ वेरी कर सकता है, बट अगर किसी के पास मीनिंग ऑफ लाइफ है तो वो सर्वाइव करने की कोशिश करेगा. बट अगर मीनिंग ऑफ लाइफ ही नहीं है तो फिर मतलब वो बहुत जल्दी गिव अप कर देगा. सो समथिंग लाइक दैट. सो दैट्स वाई फाइंडिंग आउट द मीनिंग ऑफ लाइफ इज वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. But the most powerful arguments in favor of a tragic optimism are those which in Latin are called argumenta and hominem. Jerry Long, to cite an example, is a living testimony to the defiant power of the human spirit, as it is called in logotherapy. To quote the Texarkana Gazette, Jerry Long has been paralyzed from his neck down since a diving accident which rendered him a quadriplegic 3 years ago. He was 17 when the accident occurred. Today, Long can use his mouth to stick to type. He attends two courses at community college via special telephone. The intercom allows Long to both hear and participate in class discussion. He also occupies his time by reading, watching television and writing. So basically इतनी एडवर्सिटी होने के बाद भी, लाइक पैरालाइज्ड होने के बाद भी, नेक से नीचे पूरा पैरालाइज्ड है, फिर भी वो कितने अच्छे से अपनी ज़िंदगी को जी रहा है। तो इससे रिलेटेड एक मतलब इससे रिलेटेड तो नहीं, ऐसे ही सिमिलर चीज़ मैंने यूट्यूब में भी देखी थी। एक पर्सन है, वो एक मोटिवेशनल स्पीकर के तौर पे काम करते हैं। ही हैज़ द एम फॉर लाइफ एंड उनके ना हाथ है और कमर से नीचे पाँव वाँव भी कुछ नहीं है। सो समझ रहे हो, उनके हाथ भी नहीं है और पाँव भी नहीं है, स्टिल ही इज़ डूइंग समथिंग, ही हैज़ द मीनिंग ऑफ लाइफ। तो वो सर्वाइव कर रहे हैं और बहुत अच्छी लाइफ जी रहे हो। अगर आप सर्च करोगे, आई एम फॉर गेटिंग हिज नेम, आई डोंट नो द एग्जैक्ट नेम, बट आपको मिल जाएगी उसकी वीडियो यूट्यूब में सर्च करने पे, राइट। सो बेसिकली फॉर एवरी प्रॉब्लम देर इज अ सॉल्यूशन। ही ऑल्सो ऑक्यूपाइज, ऐसे ही मैंने एक स्ट्रीम करते हुए भी देखा एक पर्सन को। ही इज़ फ्रॉम IIT आई गेस, इफ आई एम नॉट रॉन्ग। उसके ना दोनों हाथ नहीं है, बट वो सम हाउ लाइक फिर भी BGMI खेलता है। BGMI गेम है और वो खेलता है, उसको स्ट्रीम भी करता है वो। एंड ही वाज डूइंग एग्जैक्टली लाइक ही इज फाइटिंग विद अदर पीपल, लाइक इन गेम ऑब्वियसली he is fighting with other people and he's enjoying, he's doing the best with whatever he has, and he's not like crying about not having certain things which generally people do. Sometimes we also feel very hopeless, right? हमारे पास grateful रहने के लिए इतनी सारी चीज़ें हैं, फिर भी हम नेगेटिव चीज़ों को देख के बहुत ज़्यादा ऐसे उसमें इंडल्ज हो जाते हैं कि हम जो चीज़ें हमारे पास हैं उसको हम भूल जाते हैं। तो लोग फिर हमको ये जैसे ऐसे लोग आते हैं या ऐसे लोग हमको दिखते हैं, या कभी हॉस्पिटल में चले जाओ तो आपको इतना हम्बलिंग एक्सपीरियंस होगा ना, जब आप हॉस्पिटल में देखोगे कि कितनी प्रॉब्लम्स हैं लोगों की ज़िंदगी में, फिर भी दे आर लाइक गोइंग थ्रू इट, सम ऑफ देम आर ट्राइंग टू सर्वाइव इवन मोर। और आपके पास सारी चीज़ें होके भी यू आर फीलिंग दैट देर इज़ नो मीनिंग टू योर लाइफ एंड यू आर फीलिंग लाइक गिविंग अप एवरी डे, राइट। सो it can make you think in a certain way is what I can say, because अगर आप मोमेंटरी मोटिवेशन इससे मिल रहा है, वो इसका एम नहीं है। तो वो तो आप मोमेंटरी मोटिवेशन तो पिक्चर देख के भी आ जाता है, कि मूवी देख के भी आ जाता है। भाग मिल्खा भाग देखो, आपको उसको देखने के बाद ऐसे फीलिंग आने लग जाएगी, बिल्कुल मोटिवेटेड फील होने लगेगा। वो बहुत शॉर्ट टर्म होता है, बट ये जो मीनिंग ऑफ लाइफ है ना, अगर आपके पास क्लियर है तो आपको लॉन्ग टर्म में सर्वाइव करने के लिए और बेटरमेंट करने के लिए हेल्पफुल हो सकता है, राइट। तो दैट इज़ व्हाट the author is also trying to emphasize on. The intercom allows Long to both hear and participate in class discussion. He also occupies his time by reading, watching television, and writing. And in a letter I received from him, he writes, I view my life as being abundant with meaning and purpose. तो उनके पास उन्होंने लिखा कि मैं अपनी लाइफ को ऐसे देखता हूँ जिसमें abundant of meaning है, like abundant देखता हूँ जिसमें meaning भी है और purpose भी है, and that is very important. The attitude that I adopted on that fateful day has become my personal credo for life. I broke my neck, it didn't break me. I am currently enrolled in my first psychology course in college. I believe that my handicap will only enhance my ability to help others. तो उन जो वो हैंडीकैप हो गए हैं उसके बाद भी उन्होंने अपने आप को एक साइकोलॉजी कोर्स में लाइक एनरोल कराया है। उसके बाद उसको भी वो एक एबिलिटी की तरह देख रहे हैं कि जो हैंडीकैप हो रखे हैं उसके बाद भी वो इसको देख रहे हैं कि ये उनकी एबिलिटी है जिससे वो दूसरों को हेल्प कर सकते हैं। I know that without the suffering, the growth that I have achieved would have been impossible. Whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? Living example of it. Is this to say that suffering is indispensable to the discovery of meaning? In no way. पर इसका मतलब ये भी नहीं है कि सिर्फ जब पेन या सफरिंग आएगा तभी आपको मीनिंग ऑफ लाइफ मिलेगा। नो, लोगों के साथ ऐसा हो सकता है पर ऐसा नहीं भी हो सकता है, राइट। तो ऐसा जरूरी नहीं है कि सफरिंग होगी उसी के बाद आपको मीनिंग ऑफ लाइफ मिलेगा। नो, दैट्स नॉट द केस। इन नो वे आई ओनली इंसिस्ट दैट द मीनिंग इज अवेलेबल इन स्पाइट ऑफ नी, even though suffering provided as noted is in part 2 of this book, that the suffering is unavoidable. So suffering will be there. If it is if it is avoidable, the meaningful things to do is to remove its cause. For unnecessary suffering is masochistic rather than heroic, right? देखो, अनअवॉइडेबल है सफरिंग, पर अगर आप किसी सफरिंग को अवॉइड कर सकते हो तो उसके कॉज से ही हटा दो। अब ऐसा भी नहीं है कि दर्द में रहना भी लोग बहुत ऐसे ग्लोरीफाई करते हैं ना, उसकी भी नीड नहीं है। वो बोल रहे हैं जो ऐसी चीज़ है जो आपके कंट्रोल से बाहर है और वो आपको सफरिंग दे रही है, तो ठीक है, उसको आप एक पार्ट की तरह लो, उससे आप गो थ्रू करो। बट अगर कुछ चीज़ है जिसको आप ख़त्म कर सकते हो, सफरिंग को अगर आप हटा सकते हो तो उसको हटा दो, जबरदस्ती हीरोइक बनने की भी जरूरत नहीं है। ऑलराइट, इफ ऑन द अदर हैंड वन कैन नॉट चेंज अ सिचुएशन दैट कॉजेज हिज सफरिंग, ही कैन स्टिल चूज हिज एटीट्यूड। एंड जो अनअवॉइडेबल सफरिंग है उसमें भी आप सफरिंग को मे बी या सफरिंग के कॉज को कंट्रोल नहीं कर सकते हो, बट आप अपने एटीट्यूड को चूज कर सकते हो कि आप उसको पॉजिटिवली देख रहे हो या नेगेटिवली देख रहे हो, गिव अप कर दे रहे हो या आप थ्राइव कर रहे हो, betterment के लिए, it is up to you, which is very true. Long had not chosen to break his neck. Long जिनका example यहाँ पे दे रहे हैं, but he did decide not to let himself be broken by what had happened to him. तो लॉन्ग के जो केस में है, जिन जो गर्दन से नीचे को पैरालाइज हो गए थे, उन्होंने ऐसे नोइंगली या ऐसे जबरदस्ती नहीं अपने आप को पैरालाइज करवाया था, उनके साथ वो हो गया, तो उनके लिए कि अनअवॉइडेबल सफरिंग थी, पर उसके बाद जो उनका एटीट्यूड था, दैट इज़ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. उसके बाद उन्होंने गिव अप करने का डिसाइड नहीं किया, उन्होंने ब्रोकन रहने का डिसाइड नहीं किया, उन्होंने डिसाइड किया कि आई विल डू समथिंग बेटर आउट ऑफ इट, राइट, आई विल डू समथिंग गुड आउट ऑफ इट, एंड दैट्स व्हाट ही वाज ट्राइंग टू डू. As we see, the priority stays with creatively changing the situation. So it is all about perception. I have said it in the past as well. I am repeating it again. It's all about perception. Same situation can be dealt in different ways. सेम चीज़ दो तरीके से डील करी जा सकती है, पॉजिटिव होके भी और नेगेटिव होके भी. तो अगर पॉजिटिव होके करो, जहाँ तक कंट्रोल कर सकते हो चीज़ों को करो, अनकंट्रोलेबल को लेट इट बी, भगवान के भरोसे छोड़ दो लिटरली. तो या जिस पे भी आपका बिलीव है उसके भरोसे छोड़ दो आप, ठीक है. दैट कॉज अस टू सफर, बट द सुपीरियोरिटी गोज टू द नो हाउ टू सफर. It need be, and there is empirical evidence that literally the man in the street is of the same opinion. Austrian public opinion pollsters recently reported that those held in highest esteem by most of the people interviewed are neither the great artist nor the great scientist, neither the great statesmen nor the great sports figures, but those who mastered a hard lot with their heads held high. हाईएस्ट टीम उनकी थी जो हार्ड टाइम में भी अपनी हेड्स को, मतलब सिर ऊंचा करके उससे टैकल कर रहे थे, उनकी स्टीम सबसे हाईएस्ट थी, ऐसा. एंड दैट इज ट्रू, राइट. इट हैज़ नथिंग टू डू विद मनी. इन टर्निंग टू द सेकेंड एस्पेक्ट ऑफ द ट्रेजिक ट्रायड, मनी एंड पावर बोथ, दोनों का मतलब नहीं है यहाँ पे. देखो, स्पिरिट या एक चीज़ को परसीव करने का तरीका दो लोगों का अलग अलग हो सकता है, और वो पावर फुल पर्सन के पास भी हो सकता है, पावर जिसके पास नहीं है, अकॉर्डिंग टू सोसाइटी आई एम सेइंग पावर, ठीक है. या कोई ऐसा पर्सन जिसके पास बहुत सारी मनी है उसके पास भी हो सकता है, जिसके पास नहीं है उसके पास भी हो सकता है. सो दैट्स व्हाट द ऑथर इज आल्सो ट्राइंग टू एम्फसाइज हियर. In turning to the second aspect of the tragic triad, namely guilt, I would like to depart from a theological concept that has always been fascinating to me. I refer to what is called mysterium iniquitis, meaning, as I see it, that a crime in the final analysis remains inexplicable in as much as it cannot be fully traced back to biological, psychological and sociological factors. ये हमने लास्ट लाइव में भी कवर किया था कि जो एक पर्सन होता है वो ऐसा माना जाता है कि वो अपने बायोलॉजिकल, साइकोलॉजिकल और सोशियोलॉजिकल फैक्टर्स का ही सम होता है. तो यहाँ पे वो बोल रहे हैं कि that a crime in the final analysis remains inexplicable in as much as it cannot be fully traced back to biological, psychological and sociological factors. तो इसके बाहर भी कोई ऐसा कर सकता है. Totally explaining one's crime would be tantamount to explaining away his or her guilt and to seeing in him or her not a free and responsible human being but a machine to be repaired. Even criminals themselves abhor this treatment and preferred to be held responsible for their deeds. From a convict serving his sentence in an Illinois penitentiary, I received a letter in which he deplored that penitentiary. Okay. Eh, He deplored that the criminal never has a chance to explain himself. He is offered a variety of excuses to choose from. So society is blamed, and in many instances, the blame is put on the victim. Furthermore, when I addressed the prisoners in San Quentin, I told them that you are human beings like me, and as such, you were free to commit a crime to become guilty. Now, however, you are responsible for overcoming guilt by rising above it, by growing beyond yourselves, by changing for the better. They felt understood. And from Frank E.W., an ex prisoner, I received a note which stated that he has started a logotherapy group for ex felons. We are 27 strong, and the newer ones are staying out of prison. through the peer strength of those of us from the original group. Only one returned, and he is now free. As for the concept of collective guilt, I personally think that it is totally unjustified to hold one person responsible for the behavior of another person or a collective of persons. Since the end of World War II, I have not become weary of publicly arguing against the collective guilt concept. Sometimes, however, it takes a lot of didactic tricks to detach people from their superstitions. An American woman once confronted me with the reproach, how can you still write some of your books in German, Adolf Hitler's language? In response, I asked her if she had knives in her kitchen, and when she answered that she did, I acted dismayed and shocked, exclaiming, how can you still use knives after so many killers have used them to stab and murder their victims? She stopped objecting to my writing books in German. So basically, he like broke one stereotype, right? और ऐसा होता है ना, एक हम लोगों को एक पर्टिकुलर नज़रिए से देखते हैं, उनके पास्ट के हिसाब से, या फिर उनसे रिलेटेड कोई चीज़ हुई है तो उसके हिसाब से हम देखते हैं, हमको लगता है कि इसी तरीके से बिहेव करेगा, विच इज़ नॉट करेक्ट. जैसे यहाँ पे इनके केस में बोल रहे हैं कि जर्मन में अपनी सारी बुक्स लिखते थे, तो एक विमेन ने इनको अप्रोच किया और बोला कि क्यों तुम जर्मन में लिखते हो, जर्मन तो एडोल्फ हिटलर की लैंग्वेज है, एडोल्फ हिटलर बीइंग द बैड गाय, लाइक उन्होंने ही होलोकास्ट कराया था ना, तो उनकी लैंग्वेज है, क्यों तुम उसमें लिखते हो, ऐसा बोला था. तो उसके एग्जाम्पल में लाइक उनको काउंटर करते हुए उन्होंने बोला था कि आपके घर में भी चाकू है तो आप क्यों यूज़ करते हो, जबकि उन चाकू से ही कितने लोगों का मर्डर किया गया. तो देन शी गॉट द पॉइंट, राइट. सो वी शुड नॉट सी अ पर्सन इन अ पर्टिकुलर लाइट. That's what the author is trying to say. The third aspect of the tragic triad concerns death, but it concerns life as well. For at any time, each of the moments of which life consists is dying, and that moment will never recur, and yet is not the transitoriness a reminder that challenges us to make the best possible use of each moment of our lives? It certainly is, and hence my imperative, live as if you were living for the second time and had acted as wrongly the first time as you are about to act now. So that is the general philosophy that he said. Live as if you are living for the second time. आप ऐसे जियो जैसे आप दूसरी बार जी रहे हो, एंड हैड एक्टेड एज रॉन्गली फॉर द फर्स्ट टाइम एज यू आर अबाउट टू एक्ट नाउ. अगर आप कुछ गलत करने वाले हो तो ऐसा समझो कि इसी चीज़ के कारण आप पहले आपके साथ मतलब आपने सजा भुगत लिया और आप उसी चीज़ को दोबारा करने वाले हो, ऐसे करके गलत चीज़ करने से पहले ऐसा सोचो, समथिंग लाइक दैट. In fact, the opportunities to act properly, the potentialities to fulfill a meaning are affected by the irreversibility of our lives. But also, the potentialities alone are so affected. For as soon as we have used an opportunity and have actualized a potential meaning, we have done so once and for all. We have rescued it into the past wherein it has been safely delivered and deposited. Okay, just give me 1 second. In the past, nothing is irretrievably lost. Irretrievably lost. But rather, on the contrary, everything is irrevocably stored and treasured. To be sure, people tend to see only the stubble fields of transitoriness, but overlook and forget the full granaries of the past into which they have brought the harvest of their lives, the deeds done, the loves loved, and last but not least, the sufferings they have gone through with courage and dignity. From this, one may see that there is no reason to pity old people. Instead, young people should envy them. It is true that the old have no opportunities, no possibilities in the future, but they have more than that. Instead of possibilities in the future, they have realities in the past. The potentialities they have actualized, the meanings they have fulfilled, the values they have realized, and nothing and nobody can ever remove these assets from their past. In view of the possibility of finding meaning in suffering, life's meaning is an unconditional one, at least potentially. That unconditional meaning, however, is paralleled by the unconditional value of each and every person. It is that which warrants the indelible quantity of the dignity of men. Just as life remains potentially meaningful under any condition, even those which are most miserable. So, to does the value of each and every person stay with him or her. And it does so because it is based on the values that he or she has realized in the past and is not contingent on the usefulness that he or she may or may not retain in the present. More specifically, this usefulness is usually defined in terms of functioning for the benefit of society. But today's society is characterized by achievement orientation, and consequently it adores people who are successfully and happy. And in particular, it adores the young. It virtually ignores the value of all those who are otherwise, and in so doing blurs the decisive difference between being valuable in the sense of dignity and being valuable in the sense of usefulness. If one is not cognizant of this difference and holds that the individual's value stems only from his present usefulness, then believe me, one owes it only to personal inconsistency not to plead for euthanasia along the lines of Hitler's program. That is to say, mercy, killing of all those who have lost their social usefulness, be it because of old age, incurable illness, mental deterioration, or whatever handicap they may suffer. Confounding the dignity of a man with mere usefulness arises from conceptual confusion that in turn may be traced back to the contemporary nihilism transmitted on many an academic campus and many an analytical couch. Even in the setting of training analysis, such as indoctrination, may take place. Nihilism does not contend that there is nothing, but it states that everything is meaningless. And George A. Sargent was right when he promulgated the concept of learned meaninglessness. He himself remembered a therapist who said, George, you must realize that the world is a joke. There is no justice. Everything is random. Only when you realize this will you understand how silly it is to take yourself seriously. And that's true, right? Sometimes, not sometimes, most of the time we take ourselves so seriously. हमको लगता है कि जो वर्ड है हमारे ही अराउंड रिवॉल्व कर रहा है, हमारे ही अकॉर्डिंग एक्ट करना चाहिए, और अगर ऐसा नहीं होता है तो फिर हमको बुरा लगता है, ये हमारी एक्सपेक्टेशन के कारण है, राइट? तो हम चीज़ जितनी सीरियसली लेते हैं उतनी ही हमारी उससे एक्सपेक्टेशन हो जाती है और उतना ही फिर हमको बुरा लगता है। रिलेशनशिप्स वगैरह में भी, लाइक इवन फ्रेंडशिप वगैरह में भी ऐसा हो सकता है। वी आर डूइंग सर्टेन थिंग्स सो वी फील लाइक द अदर पर्सन शुड ऑल्सो act in a certain manner, but when we say when we see that the other person is not reciprocating, we feel very bad. Even in this society, that's how it works. We take ourselves very seriously, and that's the, what I can say, that's the thing which is the root cause behind the ego. In a broader perspective, we'll see there is no grand purpose in the universe. It just is. There's no particular meaning in what decision you make today about how to act. So it's just so random. One must not generalize such a criticism. In principle, training is indispensable. But if so, therapists should see their task in immunizing the trainee against nihilism rather than inoculating him with the cynicism that is a defense mechanism against their own nihilism. Logotherapists may even conform to some of the training and licensing requirements stipulated by other schools of psychotherapy. In other words, one may howl and the wolves if need be, but when doing so, one should be, I would urge, a sheep in wolf's clothing. There is no need to become untrue to the basic concept of men and the principles of the philosophy of life inherent in logotherapy. Such a loyalty is not hard to maintain in view of the fact that, as Elizabeth S. Lucas once pointed out, throughout the history of psychotherapy, there has never been a school of undogmatic as logotherapy. And at the first World Congress of Logotherapy, San Diego, California, November 6 to 8, 1980, I argued not only for the rehumanization of psychotherapy, but also for that I called the de-gurification of logotherapy. My interest does not lie in raising parrots that just rehearse their master's voice, but rather in passing the torch to independent and innovative and creative spirits. Sigmund Freud once asserted, let one attempt to expose a number of the most diverse people uniformly to hunger. With the increase of the imperative urge of hunger, all individual differences will blur, and in their stead will appear the uniform expression of the one unstilled urge. Thank heaven, Sigmund Freud was spared knowing the concentration camps from the inside. His subjects lay on a couch designed in the plush style of Victorian culture, not in the fifth of Auschwitz. There, the individual difference did not blur, but on the contrary, people become more different. People unmask themselves, both the swine and the saints. And today, you need no longer hesitate to use the word saints. Think of Father Maximilian Kolbe, who was starved and finally murdered by an injection of carbolic acid at Auschwitz, and who in 1983 was canonized. You may be prone to blame me for invoking examples that are the exception to the rule, said Omi. Okay, this is some other language, I guess. Let's see the English translation of it. But everything great is just as difficult to realize as it is rare to find. Everything great is just as difficult to realize as it is rare to find. किसी भी great चीज को realize करना भी उतना ही difficult है जितना उसको खोजना. Reads the last sentence of the Ethics of Spinoza. You may, of course, ask whether we really need to refer to saints. Wouldn't it suffice just to refer to decent people? It is true that they form a minority. More than that, they always will remain a minority. And yet, I see therein the very challenge to join the minority. For the world is in a bad state, but everything will become still worse unless each of us does his best. So let us be alert. Alert in a twofold sense. Since Auschwitz, we know that man is capable of, and since Hiroshima, we know what is at stake. This chapter is based on lecture 1 presented at the Third World Congress of Logotherapy, Regensburg University, West Germany, June 1983. Basic book, New York, blah blah blah. Okay. For further information, you can go here. Okay. For further information, basic theoretical concept, the place of logotherapy. Okay, this is again something like an address, like from where it is stuck. The Defiant Power of the Human Spirit was in fact the title of a paper presented by Long at the Third Congress of Logotherapy in June 1983. I won't forget an interview I once heard on Austrian TV given by a Polish cardiologist who, during World War II, had helped organize the Warsaw Ghetto upheaval. What a heroic deed! Exclaimed the reporter. Listen, calmly replied the doctor. To take a gun and shoot is no great thing. But if the SS leads you to a gas chamber or to a mass grave to execute you on the spot and you can't do anything about it except for going your way with dignity, you see, this is what I would call heroism. Attitudinal heroism, so to speak. Okay. See you. So, okay. Alright. Transference and counter transference in logotherapy, the International Forum of Logotherapy, volume this. Logotherapy is not imposed on those who are interested in psychotherapy. It is not comparable to an oriental bazaar but rather to a supermarket. In the former, the customer is talked into buying something. In the latter, he is shown and offered various things from which he may pick what he deems usable and valuable. And here we have afterword, almost like हम अभी पहुंच गए हैं पेज नंबर 140, टोटल पेज है 148, so almost हम लास्ट पार्ट पे पहुंच चुके हैं इस बुक के. लेट्स सी व्हाट द ऑथर हैज टू से इन आफ्टरवर्ड. On January 27, 2006, the 61st anniversary of the liberation of the Auschwitz death camp, where 1.5 million people died, nations around the world observed the first International Holocaust Remembrance Day. A few months later, they might well have celebrated the anniversary of one of the most abiding pieces of writing from that horrendous time. First published in German in 1946 as a psychologist experienced the concentration camp and later called Say Yes to Life in Spite of Everything. Subsequent editions were supplemented by an introduction to logotherapy and a postscript on tragic optimism. Tragic optimism. Optimism in tragedy, basically. On how to remain optimistic in the face of pain, guilt, and death. एडवर्स कंडीशन में कैसे आप ऑप्टिमिस्टिक रह सकते हो. द इंग्लिश ट्रांसलेशन फर्स्ट पब्लिश्ड इन 1959 was called Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl's book has now sold more than 12 million copies in a total of 24 languages. A 1991 Library of Congress Book of the Month Club survey asking readers to name a book that made a difference in your life found Man's Search for Meaning among the 10 most influential book in America. It has inspired religious and philosophical thinkers, mental health professionals, teachers, students, and and general readers from all walks of life. It is routinely assigned to college, graduate, and high school students in psychology, philosophy, history, literature, Holocaust studies, religion, and theology. What accounts for its pervasive influence and enduring value? Viktor Frankl's life spanned nearly all the 20th century. From his birth in 1905 to his death in 1997, at the age of 3, he decided to become a physician. In his autobiographical reflection, he recalls that as a youth, he would think for some minutes about the meaning of life, particularly about the meaning of the coming day and its meaning for me. As a teenager, Frankl was fascinated by philosophy, experimental psychology, and psychoanalysis. To supplement his high school classes, he attended adult education classes and began a correspondence with Sigmund Freud that led Freud to submit a manuscript of Frankel's to the International Journal of Psychoanalysis. The article was accepted and later published. That same year, at age 16, Frankel attended an adult education workshop on philosophy. The instructor, recognizing Frankel's precious intellect, invited him to give a lecture on the meaning of life. Frankel told the audience that it is we ourselves who must answer the question that life asks for us. This is important. It is we ourselves who must answer the question that life asks of us. तो हम बाहर generally answer ढूंढने की कोशिश करते हैं, right? But all the answers lies within. Even in Ashtavakra Gita, Osho and Ashtavakra also emphasize in the same thing. In Buddha philosophy, also the similar thing I have heard. All the answers is within. Even in the word of Rumi, what you seek is seeking you. Somewhat is similar to this very meaning, right? It is we ourselves who must answer the question that life asks of us. तो जिंदगी जो हमसे सवाल पूछ रही है उसके आंसर हमने खुद से देना है. And to these questions we can respond only by being responsible for our existence. This belief became the cornerstone of Frankel's personal life and professional identity. मतलब ज़िंदगी से हमको कोई भी सवाल अगर पूछा जा रहा है तो हमने ही उसका आंसर देना है, और उसका आंसर हम तभी दे सकते हैं जब हम अपने एग्जिस्टेंस के लिए रिस्पॉन्सिबल होंगे, यानी कि हमें अपनी मीनिंग ऑफ लाइफ पता होगा. इन अदर वर्ड्स, दिस बिलीफ बिकेम द कॉर्नरस्टोन ऑफ फ्रैंकल्स पर्सनल लाइफ एंड प्रोफेशनल आइडेंटिटी. Under the influence of Freud's ideas, Frankl decided while he was still in high school to become a psychiatrist, inspired in part by a fellow student who told him he had a gift of helping others. Frankl had begun to realize that he had a talent not only for diagnosing psychological problems but also for discovering what motivates people. Frankel's first counseling job was entirely his own. He founded Vienna's first private youth counseling program and worked with troubled youths. From 1930 to 1937, he worked as a psychiatrist at the university clinic in Vienna, caring for suicidal patients. He sought to help his patients find a way to make their lives meaningful, even in the face of depression or mental illness. By 1939, he was head of the Department of Neurology at Rothschild Hospital, the only Jewish hospital in Vienna. In the early years of the war, Frankel's work at Rothschild Rothschild gave him and his family some degree of protection from the threat of deportation. When the hospital was closed down by the National Socialist government, however, Frankel realized that they were at grave risk of being sent to concentration camp. In 1942, the American consulate in Vienna informed him that he was eligible for a US immigration visa, although an escape from Austria would have enabled him to complete his book on logotherapy. He decided to let his visa lapse. He felt he should stay in Vienna for the sake of aging parents. In September 1942, Frankel and his family were arrested and deported. Frankel spent the next 3 years at four different concentration camps, that is, their Sennstadt, Auschwitz, Birkenau, and Kofring, and Turkheim, part of the Dachau complex. So these are the places where the concentration camps were. All right, so the pronunciation is bit tricky. I think that's German names. It is important to note that Frankel's imprisonment was not the only impetus for man's search for meaning. Before his deportation, he had already begun to formulate an argument that the quest for meaning is the key to mental health and human flourishing. As a prisoner, he was suddenly forced to assess whether his own life still had any meaning. His survival was a combined result of his will to live, his instinct for self preservation, some generous act of human decency, and shrewdness, of course. It also depended on blind luck, such as where he happened to be imprisoned, the whims of the guards, and arbitrary decision about where to line up and who to trust or believe. However, something more was needed to everyone to overcome the deprivations and degradation of the camps. Frankel drew constantly upon uniquely human capacities such as inborn optimism, humor, psychological detachment, brief moments of solitude, inner freedom, and steely resolve not to give up or commit suicide. He realized that he must try to live for the future, and he drew strength from living thoughts of his wife and his deep desire to finish his book ऑन लोगोथेरेपी. तो ये उनके लिए मीनिंग ऑफ लाइफ था जिन्होंने जिसके कारण वो सरवाइव कर पाए कंसंट्रेशन कैंप के एडवर्स कंडीशन को भी. अपनी वाइफ के लिए वो जीना चाहते थे, अपनी बुक को कंप्लीट करने के लिए वो जीना चाहते थे, एंड दिस वाज द मीनिंग ऑफ हिज लाइफ. He also found meaning in glimpses of beauty in nature and art. Most important, he realized that no matter what happened, he had retained the freedom to choose how to respond in his suffering. तो आपके पास हाउ टू रिएक्ट का जो फ्रीडम होती है वो हमेशा होती है. He saw this not merely as an option but as his and every person's responsibility to choose the way in which he bears his burden. तो जो आपके साथ कंडीशंस हो रही हैं वो भले ही आपके कंट्रोल में ना हो, बट आप कैसे रिएक्ट करते हो वो आपके कंट्रोल में है, ऐसा विक्टर फ्रैंकल बोलने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं. Sometimes Frankel's ideas are inspirational, as when he explains how dying patients and quadriplegics come to terms with their fate. Others are aspirational, as when he asserts that a person finds meaning by striving and struggling for a worthwhile goal, a freely chosen task. He shows how existential frustration provoked and motivated an unhappy diplomat to seek a new, more satisfying career. Frankl also uses more moral exhortation, however, to call attention to the gap between what one is and what one should become. आज एक इंटरव्यू भी देख रहा था मैं, अम्बरीश वर्मा करके एक पर्सन है, तो उनकी मतलब ही इज़ अ ग्रेट एक्टर, डायरेक्टर, प्रोड्यूसर एंड राइटर ऑल्सो. TVF करके एक तो कुछ प्लेटफॉर्म है, उसमें वो पहले एज एन एक्टर काम करते थे, अब उनके अपने शोज़ भी आने लग गए हैं, सपने वर्सेस एवरीवन और एक दो और तो कुछ फेमस शोज़ उन्होंने खुद से लिखे हैं. आई एम फॉरगेटिंग द नेम. एक में वो MBA कॉलेज में भी होते हैं, मतलब ही इज़ ग्रेट एक्टर. तो उनके बारे में भी यही था कि मतलब अच्छी खासी कॉर्पोरेट जॉब कर रहे थे, मनी वाइज भी ठीक थे, बट उन्होंने रिस्क लिया क्योंकि वहाँ पे उनको हैप्पीनेस नहीं मिल रही थी. इवन दो उनके ऊपर बहुत लोन था, एजुकेशन लोन था, होम लोन था, बट उन्होंने लीप ऑफ फेथ ली, यानी कि वो जो जॉब थी उसको छोड़ के ही डिसाइडेड टू कम इन टू एक्टिंग फील्ड जहाँ पे अनसर्टेन है चीज़ें. एंड नाउ ही इज़ लिविंग अ लाइफ ऑफ हिज चॉइस, ही इज़ डूइंग ग्रेट इन हिज फील्ड. बट वो पॉसिबल तभी हो पाया जब उन्होंने मीनिंग ऑफ लाइफ को ढूंढने की कोशिश करी, जब उन्होंने लीप ऑफ फेथ ली, जब उन्होंने अपना सब कुछ वहाँ डाला. बहुत सारे स्ट्रगल्स उन्होंने देखे होंगे जो बाहर के नज़रिए से हो सकता है कि स्ट्रगल हो, बट क्योंकि उनके लिए वो मीनिंग ऑफ लाइफ था तो इसीलिए उस एडवर्स कंडीशन में भी वो सर्वाइव कर गए. एंड नाउ he came out in flying colors. He is a successful person now, and he's still learning, he's still like a long way to go, but for a start he's doing great. Frankl also uses moral exhortation, however, to call attention to the gap between what one is and what one should become, and the idea that man is responsible and must actualize the potential meaning of his life. He sees freedom and responsibilities as two sides of the same coin. When he spoke to American audiences, Frankel was fond of saying, I recommend that the Statue of Liberty on the East Coast be supplemented by Statue of Responsibility on the West Coast. To achieve personal meaning, he says, one must transcend subjective pleasures by doing something that points and is directed to something or someone other than oneself. By giving himself to a cause to serve or another person to love, Frankel himself chose to focus on his parents by staying in Vienna when he could have had safe passage to America. While he was in the same concentration camp as his father, Frankel managed to obtain morphine to ease his father's pain and stayed by his side during the dying days. Even when confronted by loss and sadness, Frankel's optimism, his constant affirmation of and exuberance about life led him to insist that hope and positive energy can turn challenges into triumphs. In man's search for meaning, he hastens to add that suffering is not necessary to find meaning, only that meaning is possible in spite of suffering. राइट करेक्ट सो सफरिंग एक इंपॉर्टेंट चीज़ नहीं है कि सफरिंग होगी तभी आपको मीनिंग मिलेगी बट पॉसिबल है कि स्पिरिट ऑफ लाइक आप सफरिंग में होने के बावजूद भी मीनिंग मिल सकती है आपको इंडीड ही गोज ऑन टू से दैट टू सफर अननेसेसरीली इज मैसोचिस्टिक रादर देन हीरोइक एंड दैट इज ऑल्सो ट्रू तो सफरिंग भी वो वाली है जो आपके कंट्रोल में नहीं है वो वाली सफरिंग रैंडम सफरिंग नहीं कि आप ढूंढने लगे बाहर जाके कि सफ़र कर लेते ताकि हमको मीनिंग ऑफ लाइफ मिल जाए नॉट दैट I first read Men's Search for Meaning as a philosophy professor in the mid 1960s. The book was brought to my attention by a Norwegian philosopher who had himself been incarcerated in a Nazi concentration camp. My colleague remarked how strongly he agreed with Frankl about the importance of nourishing one's inner freedom, embracing the value of beauty in nature, art, poetry, and literature, and feeling love for family and friends. Poetry and literature. सीधे ये सुनते ही मेरे को मूवी याद आती है डेड पोइट सोसाइटी बट ओनली इन देयर ड्रीम्स कैन मैन बी truly free. It was always thus and thus always will be. So you need to have meaning of life. You have to search for it. It will ultimately come your way. And once you'll get the meaning of life, no matter what the adversities are, what the sufferings you have to go through, ultimately you'll come out in flying colors. But other personal choices, activities, relationships, hobbies, and even simple pleasures can also give a meaning to life. Why? Then do some people find themselves feeling so empty? Frankel's wisdom here is worth emphasizing. It is a question to the attitude one takes towards life's challenges and opportunities, both large and small. A positive attitude enables a person to endure suffering and disappointment as well as enhance enjoyment and satisfaction. A negative attitude intensifies pain and deepens disappointments. It undermines and diminishes pleasure. तो अगर पॉजिटिव एटीट्यूड है सफरिंग में भी वो आपको एंड्योर करने की यानी कि उसको झेलने की शक्ति देगा डिसअपॉइंटमेंट को भी झेलने की शक्ति देगा और जो इन्जॉयमेंट और सेटिस्फेक्शन है उसको बढ़ाएगा पॉजिटिव जो एटीट्यूड है वो नेगेटिव एटीट्यूड इंटेंसिफाई करेगा पेन को डिसअपॉइंटमेंट्स को और डीपन करेगा अंडरमाइन करेगा डिमिनिश करेगा आपके प्लेजर को हैप्पीनेस सेटिस्फेक्शन इन सब को कम करेगा क्या आपकी अगर नेगेटिव एटीट्यूड है तो इट मे इवन लीड टू डिप्रेशन और फिजिकल इलनेस माई फ्रेंड एंड फॉर्मर कलीग नॉर्मन कजिन्स was a tireless advocate for the value of positive emotions in promoting health, and he warned of the danger that negatively emotions may jeopardize it. Although it's some, although some critics attacked Cousins' view on as simplistic, subsequent search in psychoneuroimmunology has supported the ways in which positive emotions, expectations, and attitude enhance our immune system. This research also reinforces Frankel's belief that one's approach to everything from life threatening challenges to everyday situations helps to shape the meaning of our lives. The simple truth that Frankel so ardently promoted has profound significance for anyone who listens. The choices humans make should be active rather than passive. In making personal choices, we affirm our autonomy. A human being is not one thing among others. Things determine each other. Frankel writes, but man is ultimately self determining. What he becomes within the limits of endowment and environment he has made out of himself. For example, the darkness of despair threatened to overwhelm a young Israeli soldier who had lost both his legs in the Yom Kippur War. He was drowning in depression and contemplating suicide. One day, a friend noticed that his outlook had changed to hopeful serenity. The soldier attributed his transformation to reading Man's Search for Meaning. When he was told about the soldier, Frankel wondered whether there may be such a meaning as autobibliotherapy, healing through reading. I'm a firm believer of it. Healing through reading. Frankel's comment hints at the reason why men's search of meaning has such a powerful impact on like many readers. Persons facing existential challenges or crisis may seek advice or guidance from family, friends, therapists, or religious counselors. Sometimes such advice is helpful, sometimes it is not. Person facing difficult choices may not fully appreciate how much their own attitude interferes with the decision they need to make or the action they need to take. Frankel offers readers who are searching for answers to life's dilemmas a critical mandate. He does not tell people what to do, but why they must do it. That's the crux of this book, I guess. He is not telling what to do, he's not helping you to give the meaning of life. He's telling what is the importance of meaning of life so that you'll get a reason behind it and you'll act accordingly. After his liberation in 1945 from the Turkheim camp, when he had nearly died of typhus, Frankel discovered that he was utterly alone. On the first day of his return to Vienna in August 1945, Frankel learned that his pregnant wife, Tilly, had died of sickness or starvation in the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. जैसे हमने पहले पढ़ा था ना, उसके लिए मीनिंग ऑफ लाइफ था अपनी वाइफ के पास वापस जाना, जिसके कारण वो उस सफरिंग को झेल रहा था. उसके अलावा एक और था बुक कंप्लीट करना, बट ये भी एक रीज़न था. बाहर आके उसको पता चला दैट शी इज़ नो मोर. टिली आई थिंक इज some other relative or one of the child of him, I'm not sure, had died of sickness of starvation in the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. Sadly, his parents and brother had all died in camps. Overcoming his losses and inevitable depression, he remained in Vienna to resume his career as a psychiatrist. An unusual choice when so many others, especially Jewish psychoanalysts and psychiatrists, had emigrated to other countries. Several factors may have contributed to this decision. Frankel felt an intense connection to Vienna, especially to psychiatric patients who needed his help in the post war period. We also believe strongly in reconciliation rather than revenge. He once remarked, I do not forget any good deed done to me, and I do not carry a grudge for a bad one. That is also one way of looking at life, right? किसी ने भी अगर आपके साथ अच्छा करा है तो उसको कभी मत भूलो, और अगर बुरा करा है तो उसका जो ग्रज है उसको होल्ड करके मत चलो, लाइक उसको भूल जाओ इस सेंस में. रिवेंज से ज़्यादा बेटर है रिकन्सिलिएशन. Notably, he renounced the idea of collective guilt. Frankel was able to accept that his Viennese colleagues and neighbors may have known about or even participated in his persecution, and he did not condemn them for falling to join the resistance or die heroic deaths. Instead, he was deeply committed to the idea that even a vile Nazi criminal or a seemingly hopeless madman has the potential to transcend evil or insanity by making responsible choices. तो सब चीज़ों में लाइक अच्छी चीज़ ढूंढने की कोशिश कर रहे थे बेसिकली. जो मैडमैन है या नाजी लोग भी हैं जिन्होंने उन पर बहुत सारा अत्याचार करा था, उनको बहुत ज़्यादा हरास किया था या फिर ह्यूमिलिएट किया था या फिजिकल पेन दिया था, उनके अगेंस्ट भी उन्होंने कुछ ऐसे ग्रज नहीं रखा है. वो उसमें भी देख रहे हैं कि अगर उनको राइट चॉइस वो लेंगे तो वो भी बेटर हो सकता है. He threw himself passionately into his work. In 1946, he reconstructed and revised the book that was destroyed when he was first deported, The Doctor and the Soul. And that same year, in only 9 days, he wrote Man's Search for Meaning. He hoped to cure through his writings the personal alienation and cultural malaise that plagued many individuals who felt an inner emptiness or a void with themselves. Perhaps this flurry of professional activity helped Frankel to restore meaning of his own life. ये उन्होंने कराई था और इसके साथ उनको खुद की भी मीनिंग ऑफ लाइफ भी मिल गया ऐसा. 2 years later he married Eleanor Swindet, who, like his first wife, was a nurse. Unlike Tilly, who was Jewish, Ellie was Catholic. Although this may have been more mere coincidence, it was characteristic of Viktor Frankl to accept individuals regardless of their religious belief or secular convictions. His deep commitment to the uniqueness and dignity of each individual was illustrated by his admiration for Freud and Adler, even though he disagreed with philosophical and psychological theories. He also valued his personal relationship with philosophers as readily different as Martian Heidegger, a renowned Nazi sympathizer, Karl Jaspers, an advocate of collective guilt, and Gabriel Marcel, a Catholic philosopher and writer. As a psychiatrist, Frankl avoided direct reference to his personal religious beliefs. He was fond of saying that the aim of psychiatry was the healing of the soul, leaving to religion the salvation of the soul. हीलिंग ऑफ द सोल के लिए साइकेट्री हेल्प कर सकती है और साल्वेशन मुक्ति ऑफ द सोल के लिए रिलीजन है. ही रिमेन head of the neurology department at the Vienna Police Polycl- Polyclinic Hospital for 25 years and wrote more than 30 books for both professional and general readers. He lectured widely in Europe, the Americas, Australia, Asia, and Africa. Held professorships at Harvard, Stanford, and the University of Pittsburgh, and was distinguished professor of logotherapy at the US International University in San Diego. He met with politicians, world leaders such as Pope Paul VI, philosophers, students, teachers, and numerous individuals who had read and been inspired by his books. Even in his 90s, Frankel continued to engage in dialogue and visitors from all over the world and to respond personally to some of the hundreds of letters he received every week. 29 universities awarded him honorary degrees, and the American Psychiatric Association honored him with the Oscar Pfister Award. Frankel is credited with establishing logotherapy as a psychiatric technique that uses existential analysis to help patients resolve their emotional conflicts. He stimulated many therapists to look beyond patients' past or present problems to help them choose productive futures by making personal choices and taking responsibilities for them. Several generations of therapists were inspired by his humanistic insights, which gained influence as a result of Frankel's prolific writing, provocative lectures, and engaging personality. He encouraged others to use existential analysis creatively rather than to establish an official doctrine. He argued that therapists should focus on the specific needs of individual patients rather than extrapolate from abstract theories. Despite a demanding schedule, Frankel also found time to take flying lessons and pursue his lifelong passion for mountain climbing. He joked that, in contrast to Freud and Adler's depth psychology, which emphasizes delving into an individual's past and his or her unconscious instincts and desires, he practiced height psychology, which focuses on a person's future and his or her and actions conscious decisions and actions. His approach to psychotherapy stressed the importance of being people helping people to reach new heights of personal meaning through self transcendence, the application of positive effort, technique, acceptance of limitation, and wise decisions. His goal was to provoke people into realizing that they could and should exercise their capacity for choice to achieve their own goals. Writing about tragic optimism, he cautioned us that the world is in a bad state, but everything will become still worse unless each of us does his best. Frankel was once asked to express in one sentence the meaning of his own life. He wrote the response on paper and asked his students to guess what he had written. After some moments of quiet reflection, a student surprised Frankel by saying, "The meaning of your life is to help others and find the meaning of theirs." That was it exactly, Frankel said. Those are the very words I had written. The meaning of your life is to help others and finding the meaning of theirs. William J. Winslade. William J. Winslade is a philosopher, lawyer, and psychoanalyst who teaches psychiatry, medical ethics, and medical jurisprudence as the University of Texas Medical Branch in blah blah blah, Galveston, and the University of Houston Law Center and Beacon Press. All right. Okay, so we have reached to the end of this book. So, in this book, if I'll summarize what I've understood through every word that the author said and the postscript as well, the meaning of life is very important. It can vary from person to person, but it needs to be there in everyone's life to get the best out of their lives. Okay, so on this note, let's just end the session. If you are interested in more such content, you can subscribe to the channel. So this is Boastful Indian signing off, and for more books if you have any suggestions, you can let me know as well in any of the comments, and you can do it here as well. Like the live stream, and if you feel like it is going to add value in your life, subscribe to the channel. So this book is over, but we'll come very soon. We'll come back very soon with another book, and yeah, that's more about it. So thank you so much, universe. Thank you so much, Radharanji. Have fun. Peace out.